Chapter 6. Body-Snatched. Well, this was irritating. She was a different shade of blonde, dirty with neglected roots. Her eyes, wide with horror and reflected back at her in the stained convex glass Chip had found on one of his daily scavengers, were brown, not blue. And her voice, when it finally came out, was nasal and posh and grated shrilly at her throat, all trace of the London accent gone. Mischievous and enterprising young men had just been whispering the most scandalous things in her ear. Gossip, jokes, kinky suggestions. They didn't mean any of it, of course, though even she wasn't above admitting that a cheap thrill could still titillate the imagination. Oh, those naughty boys with their wicked tongues. No, don't get confused. That was the film from the projector, which she'd knocked over in her haste to get to the mirror. Clumsy. Now the dusty old thing lay splintered on the floor with its bulb smashed, the reels going click, click, click until they finally stuttered to a stop. On the wall, the grainy images of the drinks party flickered and died. Not that the Lady Cassandra paid heed to any of this. Poised on unsteady legs in the basement gloom, she was twisting this way and that for a better view of her strange new anatomy, staring aghast at what she'd become.
Look at me! From class to brass!
Fretful hands, so slender and foreign but fully under her command, danced all over the body that had once belonged to Rose Tyler, examining every offending angle, tugging awkwardly on the sleeves and rumpled fabric of clothes she'd never ever worn before. Until now. Clothes! Now there was something else she'd have to get used to again. Soft, girly features curdled in disgust as Cassandra eyed the silhouette they gave her stolen figure. Ugh, too many bulges. Her third husband used to say as much. Maybe that was why he'd left. Although... She paused, eyed out the bulges again. One hand, skimming curiously over new terrain, found the zipper on Rose's tracksuit top. Tugged it down, and all of a sudden, Cassandra was much more inclined to dwell on the brighter side of things. Ooh, she cooed, peering down at her breathless new bosom. Calves! Chip watched, fascinated, as her hands unzipped the girl's jacket a bit further, streaking inside for a quick wander and a squeeze. Mere moments ago, she'd been appalled. Now Cassandra was hooting and hopping with delight in front of the mirror. Hop, 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 watching gravity work its wonders and make everything jiggle.
Ooh, baby! It's like living inside a bouncy castle!
The mistress is beautiful,
squeaked Chip, who was bouncing along with her like a child might, glad for his lady's good luck. The compliment stirred up something familiar in Cassandra's memory, and part of her suspected she'd heard it somewhere before. But no matter, it certainly did a lot to inflate her wounded ego.
Absolument,
she gushed, rolling the French word off Rose's tongue like it was something delicious. Temper tantrum already forgotten, she beamed at her stolen reflection, contemplating her new body in all its detail. The young woman in the mirror returned her grin, blonde hair tossed in joyous disarray, her face flushed with pleasure. It had been a long time since the Lady Cassandra remembered smiling. Oh, how she'd miss this. Freedom, autonomy at last. It was a marvellous feeling, and Cassandra drank it in like a heady wine. She was currently experiencing a million different forgotten sensations, could remember a million more she wanted to try. This body was ripe with the hormones of youth, womanhood well around the corner, and oh, those curves! She'd been flat for far too long. Curves were the new black. Life, as it turned out, was not so easily extinguished. After all this time spent confined to a metal frame, desiccating in this pit, she, the Lady Cassandra, reduced to a joke, alone, barely existing, watching the memories play with only Chip for company. Her fortunes ruined, her good name all but destroyed, and now here she stood, drunk with joy, properly human once more. And alive! Cassandra could feel a heartbeat pounding away in her chest, and air passing through her lungs. Even the simple act of breathing had a fresh excitement to it she'd almost forgotten. Oh, it was glorious. Absolutely glorious. What she wouldn't give right now to be naked. In fact, her hands were already pulling at the girl's clothes to follow through on that, modesty be damned, when something over Chip's shoulder caught her eye. Oh, but look. Turning from the mirror with a frown, Cassandra carefully steered her new 3D body across the room, over to the metal scaffolding which had sustained her magnificently thin self for so many years. There wasn't much left of it at all. The old skin had gone, evaporated into nothing. A faint whiff of charred smoke hung in the air. And there underneath, still floating in its little jar of chemicals, was her former cerebrum, having all but turned to mush while no one was looking.
Oh.
Chip doffed his little scrub cap mournfully at the sight of Cassandra's empty frame, forlorn and lonely without all that smooth flesh stretched across the bars.
The brain meat expired. My old mistress is gone.
But safe and sound in here,
said Rose Tyler from beside him, tapping her temple with a smile. Her voice had a clipped note of ice-cold snobbery to it now. The usual London vowels sharpened into something radically more poised and genteel. Proof positive that the psychograph had indeed done its job. Reassured, Chip smiled nervously back, until another worrisome thought occurred to him.
But what of the Rose child's mind?
Oh, Cassandra wished he hadn't brought that up. She'd been so wrapped up in her pleasing new looks, it was easy to forget she wasn't exactly alone up in here. Someone, had been nagging away at the back of her head, slurred, barely even aware, but present nonetheless. It was Rose. Of course it was. This wasn't her body anymore, but she was still there, the little tart, still just about conscious, sharing in all her little indulgences without being able to do the slightest thing about it. And she wasn't happy. Tucked away, said Cassandra at length, with a dismissive shrug of Rose's shoulders. I can just about access the surface memory. Chip watched his new mistress turn suddenly thoughtful as her clever consciousness reached back inside the blonde's head, digging deep into private thoughts and rifling through them like pages from a book. Rose hadn't come to New Earth by herself. That gentleman friend of hers from the planet's surface couldn't be very far behind. Cassandra recalled catching a glimpse of his face earlier through one of her spider spies. Handsome fellow. With any luck, he might make for a nice new playmate in this furry-faced dump. Or failing that, yet another man to steer clear from. Still, pulling herself from her old skin had been the hardest part. Blondie's body would do for now. Long enough, at least, for her to get what she wanted out of these cats. Give it a few hours, then she'd assimilate completely. The brat would be gone, and this supple new flesh would be hers. All hers. Cassandra let out a sudden gasp. Some fresh knowledge had just risen unexpectedly to the surface, and now a scramble of new images came flooding forth, memories ripping through her skull. They started small at first, glimpses of golden light and song. Space, black and terrible. For just a moment, the lingering howl of a wolf chasing her over dark places. The grating of metal monsters outside of time. And then, whispers. Whispers of conversations past, echoing across her mind.
I absorbed all the energy of the time vortex, and no one's meant to do that. Every cell in my body's dying.
Can't you do something?
Yeah, doing it now. You see, Time Lords have this little trick.
Time Lord? Well, this was something new indeed. All the things these eyes had seen, different times, different places. A blue box with immense innards. Platform 1, that ridiculous man with enormous ears and a wild, stupid grin. And stars, masses and masses of stars. Then, Christmas, with that new, skinny-looking fellow from the surface, hand in hand together under a cloud of snow which tasted like ash. But the northern accent had gone. Now, he talked a little like she did.
I just thought, 'cause I changed.
Yeah, I thought, 'cause you changed, you might not want me anymore. Changed? What did that mean, changed?
Oh, I'd love you to come.
Okay. And then today, on the surface, apples. She could smell apples. She'd been standing on the cliff's edge, fresh apple scent in her nostrils, the wind in her hair, shivering happily. Travelling with you, I love it. The man was there too. So different. His boyish features nothing like the ones she'd so hatefully burned into memory. But Cassandra knew now that it was him. Sweet heavens, it was him! It could only be him. The same man who'd brought about her downfall. The man who'd ruined everything. The man who'd killed her. Gosh. Rose's stolen eyes were wide with panic. She's with the doctor! Up in Ward 26, the doctor had left Novice Haim to her vigil with the face of Beau and gone off on a meander, hands in his pockets, willing himself not to pace again. All around him, row after row of patients, each one so carefully attended to by the nuns in their long habits and white veils, who seemed to glide across the polished floors without ever touching them. Regeneration always came with surprises. It was still early days for the doctor. He was still testing himself out, taking measure of the new him. But if there was one unsurprising trait the change had made sure to carry over, it was that he hated waiting. However long he and Rose had been travelling the universe together, nothing had ever seemed to stand still. From Platform 1 to Satellite 5, from Victorian Cardiff to the London Blitz, and all the way out to the prison planets of Justicia, it had been the trip of a lifetime. Through fear, wonder and excitement, and it had all started with the word, run. Now, here they were again. Second time round, first time out with the new face, and the doctor was still running. And Rose was still running alongside him. A little bit older, a bit wiser perhaps, and much more clued up. Only on days like this one, part of him wanted nothing more than to run away. It wasn't just past experience talking. He'd once woken up in a morgue drawer in San Francisco, and ever since then found himself hounded by the uneasy certainty that if he ever walked through the doors of such a place again, he'd be sedated and vivisected quicker than you could say, Time Lord. No, there was something about this hospital in particular, with its cat nurses and green moon signs and distinct lack of a little shop, that was beginning to make the doctor's skin crawl. As his brain began idly compiling a list of all the different diseases contained in the ward, he noticed something which made him backtrack a few steps. Well, that was odd. The blonde-haired woman occupying the bed next to the face of Beau earlier had since been replaced by a brunette. How long ago was that? 7 minutes? Come to think of it, it wasn't just one patient. Already, many more of them were showing visible signs of improvement, just in the time he'd been here. Who had ever heard of such a rapid recovery rate? The doctor resumed his meandering. Odd, yes, very odd. His mind was already half guessing at the possibilities, but the other half was still on that vague prophecy Novice Haim had told him about the face of Beau.
It said he'll talk to a wanderer, to the man without a home, the lonely god.
It didn't take much to spot the parallels and guess who the story was talking about. And curiosity was eating away at the doctor now. A great secret. What, from an ancient being older than he was? Nah, he told himself. It's just a story. Like Hames said, faint whispers, idle gossip. Can't believe everything you hear from a cat. But prophecies were dangerous, because in the doctor's case, they had an inconvenient habit of coming true, and he could never bring himself to resist one. Hope, harmony, and health. Hope, harmony, and health. The hospital's overpowering sense of sickness and medicine were making his head spin. All these doubts and maybes and what-ifs, and no one here to share them with. The doctor didn't want to rush the ill, but he really hoped the face of Beau would wake up soon. He wanted to know that final secret now. The lonely god. That did sound a lot like him. He could almost hear Rose's cheeky retort.
Well, it can't possibly be you.
Speaking of Rose, she still hadn't turned up. The doctor's hands left his pockets and ran themselves restlessly through his hair as he wondered all over again where she'd got to. Nearly half an hour had gone by since they'd lost sight of each other down in the foyer. Surely you didn't need this long to ride a lift up 26 floors? His strongest impulse was to go and look for her, just to assure himself she was all right, but he also didn't want to leave in case the face of Beau woke up. He decided to give her a little longer. A few more minutes, tops. After all, it was in Rose's nature to wander off. She was probably just exploring somewhere before making her way back to him. Maybe she'd actually found the little shop. And yet... He tried telling himself that nothing between them had changed, that the fundamentals had stayed the same. New body, same man, etc. But the doctor was getting to be even more protective of Rose than usual lately. He had even begun to suspect he might have imprinted himself on her, like a chick hatching from an egg. 2 cat nurses were whispering together behind him. Come on, doctor, just a few more minutes. When you're a time traveller, let alone a time lord, you have all the time in the world. The doctor gave up. Novice Haim, he smiled charmingly, meandering back to the end of the ward. Is there a phone I could borrow? Down below, Cassandra's brand new fingers were clutching her old skin frame for support as she retreated from the shallow pool of the Tyler girl's subconscious and forced the images back. Chip peered at her with concern.
Mistress?
That man.
He's the doctor!
She snarled, rounding on her pet with such fierce and sudden anger that he shrank away in fright.
The same doctor with a new face! That hypocrite!
Chip knew better than to speak again. Every bitter, deep-seated resentment Cassandra had been nursing for over 23 years was now boiling up inside her until she was ready to erupt. God, how she hated him. She burst in the heat on Platform 1, having used all her best skin the first time. Nothing left but her beautiful brain and a mess of gooey remains. And here he was, that damned doctor, simply swapping out his body for a new one, just to carry on living. Cassandra lifted a hand to her stolen face. Oh heavens, she was scowling. That simply wouldn't do at all. With a tremendous effort, she took a deep, dignified breath and forced her usurped features to relax again. Gotta be careful. All this lovely new skin. She couldn't afford to wrinkle it so soon. Not with the doctor out there giving her competition. Back to the mirror she went, muttering huffily to herself.
I must get the name of his surgeon. I could do with a little work.
Mind you... She rubbed an appraising hand over Rose's bottom. Nice rear bumper. Chip began to wonder if the mistress wasn't enjoying herself a bit too much over this. Before she could get in a good fondle, though, they were both startled to find the firm focus of her attention was making rather a lot of noise.
Oh,
Cassandra frowned in surprise at the shrill sound emanating from her new rump.
it seems to be ringing. Is it meant to ring?
Her fumbling fingers eventually located the telltale bulge of a chunky little contraption buzzing away in the girl's back pocket. She pulled it out and held it at arm's length, looking utterly flummoxed by the mini-screen design and Nokia logo. Chip stepped forward with a guess.
A primitive communications device, I believe, mistress.
It's so antique. What do I do?
Answer it. The thought sprang unbidden from deep inside her head. Possibly her imagination? Mindful of the potential suspicions which could arise if she didn't, Cassandra pressed a button and immediately heard a man's impatient voice blasting out of the receiver.
Rose, where are you?
The words chilled her with a sudden fright.
By all the saints, it was him! The doctor!
How could he possibly have found her so soon? Briefly, the blonde's suppressed consciousness came bubbling up to the surface again, full of frantic exuberance and hope, and in her panic, Cassandra seriously considered ending the call right there and then. The doctor was the last person she wanted to speak to. On the other hand, him turning up at this hospital with his precious little street urchin in tow was beyond mere coincidence. This was destiny. Oh, go on. Why not swallow her pride for a while, see what developed? If she could play along and bluff her way through this, it might very well tip the odds in her favour.
Rose, is that you?
How does she speak?
Cassandra hissed at Chip as she pressed the mobile up to her ear.
Old Earth Cockney,
he whispered back, ever helpful. His mistress gave a quick nod and daintily cleared her throat.
Whatcha?
She stammered, in the best possible approximation of a Rose accent she could manage.
Where have you been?
The doctor demanded, more peeved than concerned.
Seriously, how long does it take to get to Ward 26?
Ooh, this man even sounded handsome. Cassandra forced a little more brightness into her tone.
I'm on my way, guv'nor,
she declared with false enthusiasm, troweling on the slang in the hopes that was something Rose would say.
I shall proceed up the apples and pears.
What are you on about? Listen, just hurry up, will you? You'll never guess.
And here the doctor paused for effect, seemingly barely able to contain his own excitement.
I'm with the face of Bo. Do you remember him?
Cassandra forced a laugh, teeth gritting together at the reminder of her explosive demise back on the platform.
Of course I do. That big old boat race.
There was a long, agonizing pause on the other end, and Cassandra suddenly worried she might have said the wrong thing. Was the doctor suspicious already? She had, after all, underestimated him once before. But then the sound of a cork popping came in over the line. She could hear laughter, clapping in the background, and when the doctor spoke again, his attention was already elsewhere.
Right, listen, I'd better go,
he said quickly, sounding like he was in a bit of a rush.
See you in a minute. Don't get lost again.
Cassandra breathed a sigh of relief as the line went dead. Chip gave her a timid little smile, only to flinch when his mistress suddenly dashed the phone to the ground and crunched it under Rose's foot.
Tally-ho, doctor,
she spat, stolen lips curling back into a sneer.
I'll see you soon.
This was going to be a lot easier than she thought.